Hi, in this video we're going to be looking at how you can draw a tree. To draw this tree you're going to need a piece of paper, a pencil, and if you'll be colouring it in with me, some pencil crayons and pastels. Let's get started. To start off our tree we're going to start with the trunk. This is the thickest part of the tree. So we're going to draw 2 lines down for the trunk of our tree. Now instead of just drawing a straight line down, I want you to add a curve to the trunk so that it's slightly thicker at the bottom and at the top. We'll start with some roots sticking out at the bottom of the tree. So I'm just continuing this line out and then I'm going to bring it back in, and on the other side I'll do the same. Try to make the 2 sides uneven. There's not many trees that have perfectly symmetrical roots, so you can bring one of the roots out a little further or make it a little bit longer. And I'm going to add a 3rd root sticking out in the middle. Then your ground line will be slightly behind that. Right, then we start with the branches. Now usually a tree's branches will fork out, so I'm going to split my tree now. And I'm going to make my left-hand side slightly smaller than my right-hand side. If you keep dividing the tree perfectly in half, it's not going to look as realistic at the end. So you want them to be slightly different. So I'm going to start with my left-hand fork first, and I'm going to again let a branch come off that fork. Each time you draw a new branch, you need to make the branch skinnier. So I've split the tree in half here, and now I'm making each of these 2 branches skinnier than the first one. So make sure you keep to that pattern. When you split the branches, make sure they get skinnier and skinnier, and eventually we want them to get to where they're just a line. You can see I'm not drawing perfectly straight lines, they've got a little bit of a curve to them. So if you think of a stick, they're a bit jagged and they're not perfectly straight lines. You could also let it split into 3 branches or more. So all you're doing is going to each of these ends that you've got and splitting them again and again. While you're doing this, think about the end shape that you want your tree to be. Some people will even draw the shape that they would like. So if you wanted a flatter tree, you would draw that, and then you know to aim for your branches to end inside this shape. So keep in mind the shape that you'd like the tree to be at the end. When you split the branches, they don't need to be even, so one could just end off like this and the other one could be much thicker. I'm also turning my page around so that my hand is comfortable all the time. So sometimes we just keep our page straight and then we put our hand at awkward angles to try and draw. If your hand is comfortable, then you'll draw much more carefully. You'll get a better picture. So don't be afraid to turn your page around. Right, so I've got all my branches drawn now. If you wanted to leave the tree as a bare tree, you could do that and make a sunset in the background and make it a silhouette. Or you could colour it in and add foliage. So if you'd like to see how to do that, you can stay tuned. And I'll show you how we can colour this in using pastels. What we're going to do now is use your brown pastels or pencil crayons. So just look through your collection and look for any browns or light browns, even yellows will do for the trunk. And then any greens that you have for the leaves. And I'm going to start with my leaves because the brown is a darker color than the green. So if you've drawn with a brown pastel and then you're coloring around with it with a green pastel, you can pull up some of that brown pastel and it makes like an ugly, gross color there. So when you're doing pastels, that's a good tip to remember. Start with the colors that are lighter and then finish off with your darker colors, and then they're less likely to smudge. If some of the lighter color smudges into the dark color, it just kind of gets absorbed and you don't see it. So what I'm doing is starting with the darkest green that I have, and I'm just almost scribbling, and I'm starting with these little skinny branches at the ends. Now it doesn't matter if you scribble over some of your branches, and your leaves could even cover some of your thicker branches, But we want a few of the branches to stick out because you worked so hard to draw them. But if you're unsure where to start with your foliage, just do a bit of scribbling at the end of each of these small twigs that you drew. You need to make sure that you're leaving space for the other greens that you're going to add later. So don't totally colour in the picture with this dark green. We're going to use all of our greens on this. So the more of the dark green you use, the darker your tree is going to be. If you only use a little bit of the dark green, you're going to have a much brighter coloured tree. Okay, I'm just going to add a little bit more foliage or leaves up here to try and round off my tree. You don't have to have a perfectly round tree. There's not many trees in nature that look like that. So it doesn't need to look perfect, and in fact it will look more realistic if it's not perfectly symmetrical and round. Okay, now I'm going to use my next green. So I've got 3 greens. If you only have 2, then you'll just use 2. And I'm going to scribble over the darker colour, and you'll see where you've left a little bit of white, it's going to show through. And it kind of looks like lots of tiny little leaves on a tree. So I'm just going around colouring with this. Right, and then finally I'm adding my lightest green. For this picture, I'm going to imagine the light is coming from this side, from my right. So I'm going to add a little bit more of this light green on this side, so it almost looks like the light is catching these leaves and making them lighter. Okay, and then you can just add little flecks of this light colour around the rest of the tree. You could add some flowers to your tree if you wanted to too. You could do a jacaranda tree or a coral tree. They have lovely bright flowers on them. If you did a jacaranda tree, sometimes at time of year, they are just purple. So you could, instead of doing the green leaves like I've just done now, you could do all the purple flowers. Right, now that we've coloured in our foliage, we're going to start doing the trunk of the tree. If you think of the trunk of a tree, it's all knobbly and bumpy and rough. So when we're drawing or colouring in our tree, we want to remember that and make it look, give people the illusion of that texture. So again, I'm starting with the darkest brown that I have, and I'm just doing some lines across the tree here. Don't press too hard with this brown, because the harder you press, the less space you leave for other colours. So if you wanted a really dark tree trunk, you could actually press quite hard with your dark brown, but we want one where we can see a lot of different colours in it, so that we can show this bumpy, rough texture. Now I've drawn the base of my tree. I've just filled it in with these waving lines, and now I'm going to go to each of the branches that I've drawn. Just draw little lines on it. Now as the branch gets really skinny, you can't colour it in with this C shape or wiggly line, so you're just going to outline it with the dark, your dark brown, so that it stands out nicely. So do a C shape for as long as you can, and then when it gets too thin, just draw the line. So you can see now, because we've put so much foliage on it, we're just seeing odd branches, not all of the branches. Which, if you think of a tree that has all of its leaves, that is what you see. You can see the odd branch sticking out between the leaves. Right, now I'm going to go to medium brown. If you just have 2 browns, then you're going to finish off your picture now. So I'm leaving a few white gaps because I still have another colour that I would like to use. Don't worry if these branches are not perfectly straight lines, because when you colour in with a swirl or a curve, it's hard to stay in the lines, but that's another thing that's going to make your branch look a bit more realistic. Right, I'm going to go with my lightest colour, which is actually called yellow ochre. So it's a type of yellow, but it looks kind of like a light brown. And I'm colouring in the right-hand side of the tree trunk again, because remember we chose the light to come from the right-hand side, so we made the leaves lighter on this side. So we should also make the trunk a little bit lighter on that side. And then I'm just going to go in between all of these little lines, try and cover up the white bits. If you feel like your tree trunk is looking too yellow, you could go back with your darker browns and add more of them. Right, and there you have a tree. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. And if this is your first time watching a Get Started video, why not subscribe to our channel? We put up new ideas every week. If you have any questions about drawing trees, please leave them in the comment section below. You could also let me know what your favorite tree is in the comments down below, and maybe we'll try drawing it next time.